Okay, I have switched on the recording. Let me now try to get the presentation. Yeah, so this is the movie that we have to discuss. The 1925 Russian movie. Russian in Nanna, I think the better word would have been Soviet. Soviet Union was, what the country was known at that point of time, known as at that point of time. Later, it got divided in the 1980s into 1990s into the various countries, of which Russia remains an integral or a mighty part. But we consider this as a landmark in the history of films, particularly in Soviet films. This is the 1925 film, Battleship Potemkin, made by the Soviet director Eisenstein, Sergei Eisenstein, based on the 1905 revolution led by the people against the Tsar's army. Till the 1917 revolution, for a long period of time, that Russia was, or the Soviet Union was under the control, that those countries or those regions were under the control of the Tsar, and it was a kind of dictatorial regime, and many were the uprisings against the totalitarian regime of the Tsars. അങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു revolution ആയിരുന്നു in the year 1905. Of course, it involved a lot of uprisings, but Eisenstein focuses on one aspect of that revolution. What happened in a ship called Potemkin? It was one of the it was involved, it was very much involved in the revolution. The people on board the ship, the people in the Parnal, the crew members, they were, mutineers, and they rose in rebellion against the Tsar's army. Ivide ee shipila, the officials or the officers of the ship were the ones who made life miserable for the crew members, the ordinary workers and the sailors, and their uprising against the officers of the ship is what the movie is all about. So Sergei Eisenstein was requested to make a film based on that revolution. We'll come to that, what led to that request and so on. And he chose to focus his attention on what happened in the Battleship Potemkin. And that is what has made the classic. A brief introduction to Sergei Eisenstein. We'll of course come back to him and his contributions to cinema soon. This is Sergei Eisenstein. It's a silent movie, as you would have already realized from your watching of the movie, released in 1925. And even today, I think the study of cinema, of film studies, would be incomplete without referring to either Eisenstein or to the Battleship Potemkin. Some of its scenes have become remarkable, parts of the movie industry. Even today, I think films are made paying homage to many of the classical scenes, many of the immortal scenes that Eisenstein captured in this movie. In a way, you may consider this as a kind of a tribute to the revolution. This was a movie made on the basis of an official request from the government that came into power, the party that came into power after the 1917 revolution. And they had their own agenda. We'll come to that. I have a few slides telling you about the background against which this movie was made, or in which this request was made. So what the party wanted was to convey to the people the great idea of revolutions and how power is vested in the hands of the people. ആ ഒരു എഡ്യൂക്കേഷണൽ പർപ്പസിന് വേണ്ടിയാണ് ഈ ഫിലിം ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പറഞ്ഞത്. ആൻഡ് ഐസൻസ്റ്റൈൻ chose to set the action in the Battleship Potemkin. So in a way, it is a tribute to the very idea of revolution. And it's based on a real event, the mutiny of the Russian sailors against their tyrannical superiors aboard the Battleship Potemkin during the revolution of 1901. Fine. What this movie is today recognized for is because of the way in which it has used its images. More than the story. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് bore അടിച്ചു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ. I'm not surprised because the story itself is not such a fantastic story. We do not have too many twists and turns and so on. But from the technical point of view, the film has a great standing. The way he has organized the images and made this work an extraordinary work of great pictorial beauty and great elegance. That is what the movie is all about, and how it influenced filmmaking in the years after its release is what we need to discuss. A brief introduction to Eisenstein. He was born in 1898. He was part of the Red Army and began his career. He was trained as an engineer, and it is in that capacity that he entered the theatre. And even before he reached the film industry, he was very active in the theatre, and it was largely in the capacity of an engineer in a technical sense that he was involved in the theatre, not as an actor or as a writer, but as a director who had a technical bent of mind with his engineering background. Yeah, and it is rather strange that Eisenstein, who had been kind of pet of the regime of Lenin and that era, very soon fell out of favor. By the time Stalin came into power, he thought that there's too much power in the hands of a person like Eisenstein, and he actually made life miserable for Eisenstein, as a result of which he really could not contribute much to films after the entry of Stalin on the political scene. And it is not as if Eisenstein was unique, or that he was alone in making cinema during those times. Along with him, there were others like Pudovkin, Vertov, particularly Pudovkin and Vertov. They were two significant filmmakers, but I think we can't be studying all the films made in the Soviet Union in the 1920s and the way in which they made use of the technique of montage and so on. And therefore, we will focus on the most significant among them, and that is Eisenstein. And he was very much, the protege of a very significant person named Lev Kuleshov, who was a great theorist, or a film theorist of that time. We will discuss Lev Kuleshov's techniques and the impact that it had on Eisenstein, to do which I think we need to have a brief understanding of the background of Soviet cinema, particularly during the 1920s. So till the 1917 revolution, of course, we know that the Tsar's army was in power, and we do not have much by way of cinema in Russia. There were, of course, a few attempts when the new medium began to make its appearance in various parts of Europe and America too. Naturally, there would be experiments in Russia, but there weren't very many significant ventures in the film industry. But a lot of change came in 1917 revolution vannathukodu, when the Bolsheviks, led by people like Lenin, they assumed the leadership. They had a very challenging task ahead of them. The country was made up of, it's a huge country, and you have various ethnic communities there, and they are scattered across the largest country in the world. And there were so many different dialects, so many different languages that were spoken in that country, and the people were largely illiterate. So to get the people to, not exactly to control them, but to make them feel part of the new regime, that was a big task. അതൊരു ചാലഞ്ച് തന്നെയായിരുന്നു. ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു disparate group spread across this huge country, speaking different languages, largely illiterate, how do we make them come into the regime? How do we make them part of our regime? Ennayirunnu avarude oru challenge. And leaders like Lenin at that time realized the great significance of the motion picture. They realized that this is a powerful tool which can unite the people. Adoru ideological tool aayittaan avarku use cheyan thoniyathu in order to make the people feel that they belonged to this nation called the Soviet Union. Pala principalities, pala languages speak cheyyunna palarukkum we are all part of the Soviet Union ennu thonnanayitte they thought that the motion picture industry was, or that medium was, the most powerful tool. He was, of course, the first political leader of the 20th century to recognize this power that is vested in films, and the fact that it can do two things at the same time. It can entertain and it can teach as well. It's the importance of film as propaganda and its power to communicate quickly and effectively. ഈ illiterate population literature കൊടുത്തിട്ട് വലിയ കാര്യമൊന്നുമില്ല. റെവല്യൂഷനെ കുറിച്ചുള്ള ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ, നാഷണലിസ്റ്റിക് ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ, patriotic literature ഒന്നും കൊടുത്തിട്ട് വലിയൊരു കാര്യമൊന്നുമില്ല, because they would not be able to read, and first of all which language, അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ questions ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. Whereas the visual medium needs no intervention, or I mean it can speak directly, it can communicate directly and in the most effective manner to the people. And he understood that people do not need to be literate to comprehend the meaning of a film, and the kind of mass appeal that a film has is unbeatable. In no other medium has that kind of mass appeal. And Lenin's declaration is worth quoting in that context. He said, "The cinema is for us the most important of the arts," and with that statement his government gave the top priority to the development of the Soviet film industry. It was directly under the control of the party, the Communist Party that was in power. In August, it was nationalized in 1919, and Lenin's wife, she had a very significant role to play in the development of this film industry, which was a nationalized government venture. But they did not, as I told you, Eliot പറയുന്ന പോലെ ഒരു ട്രഡിഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. They did not have much of a history of either Soviet films or even films in general to build upon, because whoever worked in that industry, ചെറിയ filmmakers ഒക്കെ അവരൊക്കെ they had already gone to different parts of Europe, and they had taken their equipment and their film stock and everything. So it was almost like building a new industry from scratch. And the kind of situation that prevailed in Russia made it a kind of what shall you say, a territory beyond accessibility for many of the European countries, and therefore they could not even import new equipment for whatever for their film needs. And added to that, they had a lot of infrastructural difficulties, power shortage, restricted use of whatever little resources they had, and so on. But the cinema committee, this powerful committee that was institutionalized and which was under the control of the government, it was given a great deal of power and boost, and it founded in that course of time the first film school to train directors, technicians and actors for the cinema. It can be considered as the first instance in the history of the world, the first film school that was founded in Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union. Adine പേര് ഏതായിരുന്നു? VGIK, short form for a Russian term. I do not know how to read the Russian term, but anyway, it means All Union State Institute of Cinematography. Even today, it does not, of course, do the kind of work that it used to do then, but at that point of time, this was a powerful institute that came up, which taught people the art and the craft of filmmaking, acting, directing, and so on. And their main intention, ഇതാ ഈ അന്ന് റെജീമിൽ വന്ന ഈ കമ്മ്യൂണിസ്റ്റ് പാർട്ടിയുടെ ഐ മീൻ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു it was a powerful institute set up by this party, and naturally അവരുടെ ഉദ്ദേശം എന്തായിരുന്നു? To teach the people the glory of their party, the revolution and so on. ഈ whole Soviet ജനതയെ ഈ രീതിയിൽ educate ചെയ്യുക. That was to indoctrinate in them, to teach them the glory of revolution. And that is why the ventures that came out of this institute are known as agitki. Adine or Russian word aanu, it trained people in the production of agitki. That is known as agitprop, agitation plus propaganda. The propaganda of agitation. Agitation is nothing but revolution. Annathe രാജ്യത്ത് അത് വലിയൊരു കാര്യമായിരുന്നു. എന്താ സർവ്വലോക തൊഴിലാളികളെ ഒന്നിക്കൂ എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്നവർ, they were very, very much convinced about the power of revolution, and they wanted to educate people about the power of revolution and to propagate that idea. So propagating agitation, that was their intention, and ആ ഒരു കലാരൂപത്തെയാണ് ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ agitprop എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. Agitation plus propaganda. So whatever newsreels remained in the country at that time, they were all re-edited and conveyed to people to speak about the glory of the revolution that had ended the centuries-old Tsar's rule and made the country a socialist country. Okay, അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു വിജയഗാഥ പറയിപ്പിക്കാനായിരുന്നു അവർ. They thought that films would be an ideal medium. So this is just a poster, the kind of posters that were published and released all over the country. Agitprop is the spreading of ideas, amongst which communist propaganda used in Soviet Russia, that is spread to the general public through popular media like literature, plays, pamphlets, films and other art forms with an explicitly political message. In the context of literature, you have the foundation of the prolet cult. Prolet cult was a cultural organization that was set up in Russia in order to encourage and promote the writing of literature that again celebrated revolution. And the this agitprop productions were transported on specially equipped agit trains. അത്രയും അധികം ഫണ്ട്സ് ഗവൺമെൻറ് ഇതിനു വേണ്ടി ചിലവാക്കി. അതിനുവേണ്ടി അത് പ്രൊപ്പഗേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനും അത് ഡിസെമിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ടും they had all kinds of channels for that. Agit trains and agit steamers to the various provinces, വിദൂരമായിട്ടുള്ള സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലേക്കൊക്കെ ഈ റെവല്യൂഷൻ്റെ ഗുണം അറിയിക്കാനായിട്ട്, where they were exhibited to generate support for the revolution. And most of these directors, നമ്മൾ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ Eisenstein, Pudovkin, Vertov, all of these writers and directors were trained in this school and this form of agitprop. And it was not as if life was very comfortable for them. Even technically they had a lot of hassles. Very often they had to do without celluloid available ആയിരുന്നില്ല. അപ്പോൾ അവർ പല ഇന്നോവേറ്റീവ് ടെക്നീക്സ് ഒക്കെ യൂസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടാണ് whatever images അവിടെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു അത് പല രീതിയിലും ഒക്കെ ഉപയോഗിക്കുകയാണ്. So that is how you have this development of the new technique where the image, the single image becomes very significant. And ഐസൻസ്റ്റൈൻ്റെ ഫിലിം കാണുന്ന സമയത്ത് നമ്മൾക്ക് അതിൻ്റെ ശരിക്കും മനസ്സിലാവും. And that is where we need to remember the great teacher in this institute, Lev Kuleshov. Eisenstein was trained briefly under Kuleshov. So the students at this institute were instructed to write, direct and act out scenarios as if they were before the camera. Camera ഒന്നും ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. They did not have enough equipment, and then on paper they assembled various shots into completed films. Celluloid ഇല്ലാത്ത കാലത്ത് ഉള്ളത് വെച്ചിട്ട് they somehow managed. And Kuleshov, he got a particular shot, or a particular shot made from a movie made by one Griffith, Intolerance എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞൊരു അതിലുള്ള ഒരു one particular shot, and he used this particular shot over and over again to teach his students. These classes that he conducted were known as the Kuleshov workshop, and he this shot became such an integral part of these workshops. They had memorized its shot structures and could rearrange its multi-layered editing sequences on paper in hundreds of different combinations. Same material vechittu, they are forced to try out different combinations. And in the Kuleshov effect in the this is what, this is one integral part of the workshop that he conducted. He would intercut the same shot. What you have is Griffith intolerance in the parna or filmelula or actors. The very expressionless face of that actor was used, and you have face to convey how you can make use of shots to tell a story. Kuleshov would place it beside different things, juxtaposing this shot with other shots. Appo ingane film കാണുന്ന സമയത്ത് ഈ മുഖം കാണും, then you have something, some object. Sometimes it would be a steaming bowl of soup. Sometimes it would be a dead woman in a coffin, and sometimes it would be a little girl playing a teddy bear. ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള പല സീൻസും ഈ expressionless face ആയിട്ട് he would juxtapose. Ultimately, when you watch the movie, with these shots put together, you realize that the same face, the same expressionless face seems to convey so many expressions when it is juxtaposed with each one of these. This bowl of soup in the it somehow enables the audience to see hunger on his face. അയാളുടെ മുഖത്ത് hunger ഒന്നും ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല, പക്ഷേ the way that it is juxtaposed, നമ്മൾ രണ്ട് pictures അടുപ്പിച്ച് കാണുന്ന സമയത്ത് it is like an objective correlative. നമ്മളുടെ T.S. Eliot പറഞ്ഞ objective correlative പോലെയാണ്. It is a kind of language that is developed which will evoke in the mind of the audience a particular emotion. And here the man's face seems to convey that expression of hunger. Then when you see the dead woman in the coffin, adinte aduthe mukham vekkuna samayathu, you get the idea that he is conveying a sense of sorrow. And when you see it beside the little girl playing with a teddy bear, you seem to get the idea that iyalde mukhathu oru achchante bhavam, the paternal affection. So this is what is known as the Kuleshov effect, juxtaposing shots together to create the impression of various emotions. And he said that the shot in film always has two values. One that is embedded in itself, adinte ullil adangiyittulla as a photograph, as an image. In reality, it has one value. Pinne when it is placed alongside or beside in juxtaposition with another shot, that is the second value. And he said that that has more importance and greater signification, cinematic signification, than the first. And time and space in cinema must therefore be subordinate to the process of editing. Cinemayile kada parayanamengil inganeyulla editing ubhayogikkanam. And this kind of editing was what they called montage. Evidunnu vannu montage in the word? It came from the French verb monter, which means to assemble, to put together. Adana adinte artham. Montage ennu parnal nothing but putting different shots together to convey a particular idea, emotion or a story. Assembling. Adana montage enna vakkinte ulbhavam. So Kuleshov conceived of montage as an expressive process whereby dissimilar images could be linked together to create non-literal or symbolic meaning. Namalka, we know that when you read a poem, there's so much that is conveyed beyond the language. ഈ കവിതയുടെ വാക്കുകൾക്ക് അപ്പുറം ആണ് നമ്മൾ അർത്ഥം കാണുന്നത്. Where does it come from? It comes from the kind of words and the kind of images that are used in the poem. Similarly, in films, by the way that shots are arranged together, you can convey a non-literal or symbolic meaning. And I think I'll stop in 1 minute. നമ്മൾക്ക് ഐസൻസ്റ്റൈനിലോട്ട് in tomorrow's class will come. Two of his most brilliant students were of course Eisenstein and Potemkin. So we'll talk about the difference between Eisenstein and Pudovkin and then take off with Eisenstein's contribution in the next class. Okay, so I'll stop for the day because you might